Tonight we're going to open our Bibles to the book of 1 Kings chapter 3. And I want to talk about a prayer that Solomon prayed. He had just become king over Israel. Of course, David had died. And I'm not going to read all of Solomon's prayer, but I want to read some of it, and I want to respond to how the Lord answered back to Solomon. In verse 7, "And now, O Lord, my God, thou hast made thy servant king instead of David, my father, and I am but a little child, and I know not how to go out or come in." So, first of all, Solomon really was not just a little child, but in his eyes, in his mind, he considered himself a little child. And it says, "And thy servant is in the midst of thy people." Notice he calls the people of Israel as God's people, "which thou hast chosen, a great people, that can be not numbered or counted for multitude. Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad, for who is able to judge this thy so great a people?" So we notice in the book of James it says, "If any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who give to all men liberally and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. But let him ask in faith, nothing wavering. For he that wavereth is like the wave of the sea, driven with the wind and tossed. For let not that man think he shall receive anything of the Lord." So as we go before the Lord in prayer, if we go before the Lord for understanding or wisdom or direction, we've got to go in faith, believing that God's going to hear our prayers, that God is going to respond, that God's going to answer to us. So Solomon, he cries out to God in faith. And of course, the Lord responds. And in verse 10, 1 Kings chapter 3, "And the speech pleased the Lord, that Solomon had asked this thing." So remember now in the book of James at the very end, it says, "You have not because you ask not, and when you ask amiss, that you may consume it upon your lust." So really what we ask from the Lord by faith will determine whether or not God is pleased with us. Now remember, in Hebrews chapter 11, it says that he that comes to God must believe that he is, and he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. For without faith it is impossible to please God. So there should be a cry within our heart that we should please the Lord. And it says, "And his speech pleased the Lord, that Solomon had asked this thing. And God said unto him, Because thou hast asked this thing, and hast not asked for thyself long life, neither hast asked riches for thyself, nor hast asked the life of thine enemies, but hast asked for thyself understanding to discern judgment, behold, I have done according to thy words." So he says, I'm going to go ahead and respond to what you've asked. "Lo, I have given thee a wise and an understanding heart, so that there was none like thee before thee, neither after thee shall any arise like unto thee." For in other words, what I'm going to give you, Solomon, is going to be different than what I'm going to give anybody else from this moment forward. "And I have also given thee that which thou hast not asked." So when we ask God for that which pleases the Lord, according to Ephesians, he does exceedingly abundantly above all that we could ask or think, according to the power that works in us. And so, he said, "I am the Lord and I change not." So what God did for Solomon in his day and hour, he will do for us if our hearts are right with the Lord. And I want to share a little experience I had back in 2008 right along this line. So Solomon has asked for wisdom in order to give direction to the people of God, and he recognizes that they're not his people, they belong to God. And so God says, "I'm going to give you what you've asked, but I'm going to give you riches and honor, so that there shall not be any among the kings like unto thee all thy days. And if thou wilt walk in my ways to keep my statutes and my commandments, as thy father David did walk, then I will lengthen thy days." In verse 15, "And Solomon awoke, and behold, it was a dream." So God does visit us in dreams and visions, but now God gave Solomon tremendous wisdom. Now if you read the book of Proverbs, it's obvious that not all of this wisdom came directly from God himself, but some of it came from his father David. And David had taught Solomon, he said, "My son, attend to my words, incline thy ear unto my sayings, let them not depart from thine eyes, keep them in the midst of thine heart, for they are life unto those that find them, and health to all their flesh." And so we need to understand, we need to grasp, we need to perceive the importance of the Word of God hidden in our heart. David said, "I've hidden your word in my heart that I might not sin against you." So now God gave to David this instantaneous download of amazing wisdom and understanding and insight. And people came from all around the known world to sit at the feet of Solomon to learn this wisdom. As a matter of fact, when the Queen of Sheba came, she made a declaration. She said, "You know what, I heard of your wisdom before I came here, and I kind of doubted it, but now that I'm here, I realize I had not even heard half of the truth." Or in other words, the wisdom you've got, Solomon, is way beyond what I comprehended you could have. But here's the problem. It was a divine download into the heart of Solomon, but it did not mean that he walked it out. It didn't mean that he lived it. Yeah, God gave him revelation. God gave him understanding. God gave him insight, but he didn't walk it out. As a matter of fact, it's a terrible situation because later on, after the book of Proverbs, he wrote another book, and that book is called the book of Ecclesiastes. And the problem with Solomon is that Solomon, he didn't obey God in every area. And I'll give you an example. God told him not to take any wives from anybody else but then from the tribe of Israel. Well, the very first wife that Solomon took was the daughter of Pharaoh from Egypt. And then from then on, it just got worse and worse and worse. And he ended up with hundreds of wives and hundreds of concubines. And he ended up building them temples and tabernacles for their false gods. And he really, really went astray. In the book of Ecclesiastes, he finally repents. And he said, "There's two things I've learned." He said, "Fear God and obey him." Now, I could add to that. Yes, fear God, obey him, and love him. Remember, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, soul, mind, strength, and being. So God had given to Solomon divine insight into the reality of wisdom and understanding.